Welcome to another of our getting to know folk around Clèir Eilean Ì videos and podcasts. Welcome to you, wherever you are watching or listening. Our guest today is the Rev Paul Beautyman, and Paul and I go back a long, long way. That must be 30 years ago that I was involved in summer missions and things, and you were summer mission coordinator. Goodness, how the years pass, but we're both still looking the same as we did in those days.
Treating us well.
Yes. Welcome to you. Tell us a wee bit about what you've been up to over the years and what you're doing now.
Well, Donald, it is lovely to catch up again and have a chat. So since the 90s, Donald, you're right, I took on a role working for the Church of Scotland's, as it was then, Board of National Mission, and worked from St Ninian's Centre, which many of us have good memories of, and ran the summer missions programme for the Church of Scotland. And after that moved into, again, still with the Church of Scotland, its church planting programme. So from 2002 until 2009, was planting a church for young people and their families in Edinburgh in partnership with the churches and community groups in the south side of Edinburgh and Gilmerton. And in 2009 moved westwards into the Presbytery of Argyll, as was, living in Dunoon, where I still live. And from 2009 to 2019, worked as a Presbytery's youth advisor, and also started up a youth project called EXP, which still runs in Dunoon. And that was 2019, felt like kind of God's nudging me into something else, not sure what that was. So part of that was doing a PhD into how Christian youth workers are sustained, and also now what I do in my own business of youth work journeys, which trains, supports, mentors Christian youth workers. And out of those conversations, made contact with people in Clèir Eilean Ì, which leads me now to taking on a kind of consultancy role, contracted work with this new presbytery.
Yeah, and it's exciting stuff as we look forward to working with you. And I know that work has started already. You had visited me a month or so ago, and I know you've been listening and talking to folk around the presbytery. So tell us a wee bit about your initial thoughts.
So the aim, Donald, is to support, share and grow. Support what is happening. Share those that are doing things across a very geographically diverse presbytery, of course, but make those connections, and then hopefully people can grow. And I'm wrestling with this fairness, effectiveness. It would be fair for me to divide my time, across the presbytery, but not very effective. So what I'm doing is hopefully prayerfully discerning and focusing on some particular areas. So far, I have visited, yes, yourself in Ardgour, then went over to Mull and had a good time with Amanda McQuarrie on Mull. I've been down to Fort William, met David Sims over there. And even in that first visit, touched on intentionally 3 very different types of place. Yourself, remote rural on the mainland, with Amanda on Mull, remote rural island, where across the large island of Mull, she's the only clergy. And so big questions being raised there by yourself and Amanda. How do you have a ministry in a way that is quite different to the parish ministry that a lot of folk trained for? And how do you engage with children and young people when they're spread so broadly? But contrasting that, when I visited Fort William and met David, they are a large rural town with a satellite of villages around it, but quite large areas within the town that are not involved, but David working to change that. So even on that first visit, I touched on some of the varieties that I'm trying to know about. Later visits, I went up to Kyle of Lochaush, met with John Murdo-Nicholson, and Timmy of the Cool Project. So they are an interesting, another one that works quite often across the presbytery where there's a local Christian youth project, whether an independent one like EXP in Dunoon that I visited with Jack McGonigal leading that, or an associate worker scheme with Scripture Union that Timmy is involved with. So raising the questions, how do churches work, their children's work or their youth work, when there's a Christian youth project in the area? That would be similar when I went down to Campbellton and met a presbytery employee, Kenny Wilson, and he's working ecumenically there in a local high school with the SKY South Kintyre youth team. And again, another model, a large rural town, but with a satellite of villages around it and an ecumenical approach to the high school. The other place I visited was Oban, another town, but again linked, interestingly, with Tyree. So raising questions of how does the presbytery work that linkage and union approach that has had to be embraced in the current climate, as well as how does a church work in a large town. So that's been some of the variety, and I'm not finished my visits yet. I've got a few more to do just after the presbytery conference in a few weeks' time.
We often hear the stories, the narrative of decline, and there's no young folk around the church. But it does seem that there's a new story emerging, and we're hearing about the quiet revival, particularly coming out of that Bible Society report from England and Wales. From your work among younger folk, are you seeing some of that in Scotland? Do you think there's an increased curiosity in what the Bible's saying, what the church can do, what Christian faith is all about?
It's a good question, Donald, and it's a fascinating piece of research. The truth is that's always been happening. It's just that the church hasn't listened. And so my experience of, like yourself, Donald, on summer mission would be that the conversations that you would have on a summer mission team with young people, either on the team or with young people that were meeting outside in the community, were always sparky, alive, challenging. And yet my experience is the church didn't want to listen because it was doing well, thank you very much. And so from the high point numerically, I think the high point numerically for Church Scotland attendance was the 1960s. And then there was a slow decline. However, there are two responses in terms of crisis. One is to turn inwards and one is to turn outwards. And my opinion would be that over decades, the church has turned in on itself and become obsessed with its own structures and its own survival. And only now, when it is in crisis, it's heard the voices that have always been there. So yes, there are signs of hope, but my argument would be they've always been there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take on it. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy for me to say, Donald. I've been part of a church that has struggled, and I've been the privilege of working for the Church Scotland, like yourself, in ways where it's grown. So it's certainly not a finger pointing comment at all, I hope, but one that says, what can we now do to listen? And the research, the research is available online, and I'll refer to it at the Presbytery conference. But I think what struck me was when there is a willingness to listen and a willingness to hear what is being said beyond the current structures and beyond what currently fits. So, for example, the Bible Society research, which is often picked up on, is about Bible reading, and that's true. It's one of the 10 main points. But interestingly, another one is about socially engaged congregations. And it states that many of the young people who are engaged in this quiet revival want to make a difference in their communities. And so there are strands in the report that I won't say people are ignoring, but I think some people embrace more easily because it fits within what they're already doing. So many of us in churches would go, oh, great, we want to read our Bibles. Of course we do. Young people want to read their Bibles, and they're just coming. The miracle for me, Donald, over the years isn't that young people come to church, that people get out of the church and engage with their schools, with their community groups, with their neighbours. When people do that, when they genuinely love their neighbour, when they genuinely love their community, when they genuinely love and serve their schools, that's when the growth occurs. And I think that's the undercurrent of what's in the Quiet Revival report.
Yeah. You've mentioned the EXP project. Tell us a wee bit more about what it has been able to achieve.
The EXP project is based in Cowell, so the area around the town of Dunoon, and it was when I moved there in 2009, partly with the task of developing young people, which already happened there before I arrived. Of course, the work of Glenda Wilson, the former deacon, taking young people to Iona, was a significant part of the work, and what Janet McKellar had done, also with young people there. So I came into something that was already happening. But what we started doing, Donald, was similar to what I've just talked about, that undercurrent of engaging with young people in partnership with the schools. And Stuart Shaw, whom we know as Pro Tem Presbytery Clerk, I believe, was the head teacher. And I still remember in my first meeting with Stuart when he was the head teacher at Dunoon, giving me a phrase which I'd never heard before when he said, Paul, I don't want a wheelie bin chaplain. And yes, my eyebrows raised as yours did just now. I didn't know what he meant, but what Stuart said was, I don't want a chaplain that we just wheel on for an assembly and then we wheel off again and never see.
Right, yeah.
Stuart made sure the doors were open to myself initially and then others who became part of the school community, running clubs, pastoral care in the corridors, casual conversations, organised events, working with the RME department, until we eventually started a Friday night club. We ran summer camps. And later today, I'll meet with a young person, 26-year-old, now a mature Christian. Another one I'll meet tomorrow again, coming back for the Kill Games, involved in youth work, in a full-time way. And yeah, that took a long time, 10 years for these stories to happen. And then followed up, of course, Susan White leading that, and now Jack McGonigal. But there's something about the going before the coming. There's something about the loving before people become lovable that for me are at the heart of Jesus' message. Go and make disciples, teach and baptize. So it is about the going.
What would you say to me and other colleagues around the place are thinking, yeah, I need to do more in getting out there and engaging with folk. What's the first thing I should do?
I think you're doing already, Donald, by bravely asking the question. Some of the hardest things, I suspect, for many of us involved in ministry just now is, what do we say no to? We have volunteers and staff with ever increasingly large remits across larger geographical areas. And so one of the huge challenges is what we say no to. If we have no capacity for working with children and young people, or for the elderly or the housebound, then, yeah, bluntly put, we have to say no to some things that we're currently doing. Secondly, I would say, what makes you come alive? Was it Irenaeus who said the glory of God is a person fully alive? And one of my lecturers at Aberdeen University always said, the curse of the church is passionless duty. And so for us to rediscover who we are as God's people, what makes us come alive, and to find a way of connecting with others. Is it a love of the countryside? Is it a love of music? Is it a love of book reading? It's making those connections, I think, Donald.
Yeah.
And then sensitively, compassionately sharing our faith in these places where the relationships are warm. I was talking to a youth worker just recently, and he said one of the motivations for him about growing teams is the disciples who were such a diverse group. You know, the Simon the Zealot, Matthew the tax collector, sworn enemies, but somehow they found around Jesus a way of being together. And so I think for me, Donald, is after we say no to some things, we discover who God has called us to be, who we are, and then try and find connections with other people.
Yeah.
Another challenging thing, and I hope I say this gently, is, you know, Peter Nielsen said this to me one time, we need to stop starting with the church. And I think the vision of a Christian community that is rooted in love of neighbours, or the community centre, or the school, that when we love and serve and share our Christian faith in those places, that's where faith becomes alive. But if we concentrate only on a model of church, i.e., ourselves and our Sunday morning worship, that has mainly failed for 50 years in terms of reaching not just young people, but many people, then I think we'll continue to struggle.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned Peter Nielsen there. Something that I frequently come back to was something Peter said around the time of Church Without Walls report. What kind of church are we leaving for the next generation? And yeah, I mean, it's a frightening challenge, and yeah, you're absolutely right. We need to let some things go. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they kept referring to, we need to bury our preferences and do things that are not for us but for other folk. And I love that phrase, bury our preferences. Yeah.
Yes, that's bravely said. You mentioned the Quiet Revival report, and just returning to that, two of the key quotations are points: the need for discipleship and the spiritual generation. My experience of growing up, Donald, was a membership model. You know, and I'm grateful for the church I grew up in, St Andrew's Church in Falkirk, and Bob McGee. You know, a good holy man of God. But there was that sense of membership. Okay, you're a member now. You know, and how we continue to grow in our own faith so that those of us who still go to church no longer see church as something we passively attend, but something we actively participate in. And if young people are part of this quiet revival, that spiritual generation, what's very much part of that, I would say, is conversation, discussion, and therefore how we in our congregations are willing to embrace that, that willingness to talk, to converse, to be challenged, to challenge others. Again, talking to a youth worker recently, said if we thought more about circles and less about rows in our churches, there would be something quite profound there. So instead of looking at the back of someone's head or looking towards one person who's leading our worship, if we met in the round more often. So there's something there. And another comment, Donald, would be that spiritual generation, what I find about a lot of young people is a willingness to embrace with the Christian disciplines that have been around for thousands of years. So solitude, scripture, reflective practice, retreats, which perhaps you have, of course, just in your own parish, the Kilmaloo Retreat Centre. But it's the normalising of all that, rather than, I think, perhaps a generation of us for whom that was the exception. But the spiritual discipline that I think are much more rooted in young people's lives and connected into issues around mental health and well-being, that holistic expression of the Christian faith, that holistic discipleship, the whole body, the whole life, body, mind, spirit, with a Christian distinctiveness in there.
You mentioned there the circles rather than rows. Yesterday, I was up in Strathpeffer doing a wee recce before the conference on the 10th of September, and You'll be delighted to know that we'll be sitting in circles,
Excellent.
not rows, and we're looking forward to having some input from yourself in the afternoon. It's been great to talk with you just now. A chance to introduce you to folk around the presbytery who may not have met you, and we look forward to that continuing partnership in discovering how we can reach out to our communities and share the good news of Jesus with particularly younger folk. We often talk about the under 40s. I often used to think of younger folk just being anyone that was younger than me. But
That's an ever-increasing age group.
well, yes. Paul, it's been a delight to catch up with you online. Really looking forward to your input at our conference and seeing you in Strathpeffer on the 10th of September. Any final words of encouragement, support, sharing from you, Paul?
Thanks, Donald, for your generosity and giving your time and allowing me to speak. I'm looking forward to, it's easy to do these kind of conversations, and it's easy to fling out little bullet points and phrases. And what I'm really looking forward to, Donald, about my time with the presbytery is meeting people on the ground. And I've already said how I've visited. I look forward to meeting folks on the ground, and it's not easy working with children and young people just now, but it's quite straightforward, So I look forward to doing that. How do we love? How do we serve? And yeah, thank you for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. Bye, Donald. Bye-bye.
Cheers. God bless you, Paul.